Welcome back to the War on Terror, last video of this unit. Before I jump into Christmas Eve of 1979, some of you guys' favorite holiday, we need to make sure that we are again reminded that each of these dates sets the stage for what happens in 2001. They play a role in what's going on today. They shape the modern world we live in, and again, they shape the event of 9/11. Now, Christmas Eve, 1979. Now, before we even jump into here again, we need to make sure we have context. What's going on in the world in 1979? Well, we need to make sure we understand that this is the height of the Cold War. The Cold War is in its third decade and does not look like it's slowing down anytime soon. What happens on Christmas Eve is going to speed up the end of the Cold War by most historians' accounts. But what is the Cold War? Well, you're looking at this intense rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. These first and second world countries, or empires I should say, first world, these are countries that are aligned with the United States, where the second world are the countries aligned with the Soviet Union. You're looking at these second world countries right here in red. The dark red, these are the countries that are actually officially part of the Soviet Union empire. They all listen to Russia and Moscow, where the countries in the light red, the pinkish, these are called satellite states. Again, we'll talk more about this when we get to the Cold War. Now, they had competition over control of the third world countries. They wanted control of these third world countries either for their resources, to tap into their markets, to trade with, or just to have economic or military allies or political allegiances in that area. So we need to make sure we understand a lot of these third world countries, which you see in the southern part and the continent of Africa, were competed over by both the United States and the Soviet Union. One of those countries that, again, is going to take us Christmas Eve 1979, is on the southern border of the Soviet Union, and that country is Afghanistan. Now, Afghanistan, historically speaking, a very rural, very religious country, or I should say people. It's a place that, by military accounts, is a very easy place to invade. However, it's a very difficult place to get out of. And if you guys look into the British history, there's going to be some British military tragedies in Afghanistan in the 19th century, and we're going to see a tragedy in the 20th century. There was a saying that Afghanistan's a place where empires go to die. And again, that will be something held true with the Soviet Union looking in the 1970s, 79 to the 80s. Now, looking at Afghanistan, 1979, we must understand that geography plays a role. Where is Afghanistan? Like as I mentioned, it's on the southern border of the Soviet Union. It's also sandwiched in between Pakistan on its east and Iran to its west. Now, looking at Afghanistan, the Soviet Union found this place to be very important to them. It's actually the fourth highest country they invested in throughout the world. And when I say invest, they're going to send a lot of money and resources to Afghanistan, trying to improve its hospitals, trying to improve its schools, trying to improve its roads, trying to improve its transportation. They try to modernize Afghanistan. Again, very mountainous, rural region, very backwards according to many Western standards. So this is what the Soviet Union is there for. We see trouble, though, brewing coming in 1979. They try to set up a communist state. There's going to be challenges to that communist state. We see the two leaders here. The gentleman on the left, this is Nur Muhammad Taraki. He's the leader of Afghanistan. And his bromance on the right over there is Leonid Brezhnev. He was the leader of the Soviet Union in 1979. And you can see that unibrow is level 2000. He's got a thing going on. I'm not sure I could even take him serious if I was having a conversation. It'd be very difficult to not glance and stare at that unibrow. Now, on a more serious note, Brezhnev and Taraki are very, very close. Taraki is getting challenged by some of his people in Afghanistan to stop listening to Soviet power, Soviet influence. He's going to ask Brezhnev to send people down to help him keep in power, stay in power. And Brezhnev is going to be sad when this bromance comes to an end because Taraki's right-hand man, Hafizullah Amin, will assassinate Taraki, and Brezhnev will be saddened. He'll have tears come down his eyes, I'm sure. And he's going to be very angry with Amin for carrying out this act without asking him. Now, after Amin takes power, he's going to very quickly start rounding people up. He's going to start gunning them down. No jury, no judge. He's going to start exterminating people. He's going to start throwing them into ditches with bulldozers. And this is going to upset Brezhnev. Now, Brezhnev has to make a decision. What do I do with Amin? What do I do with this government? And he's going to act. He's going to send in special forces on Christmas Eve, 1979. And he's going to storm the palatial estate that Amin is staying at. He's going to have his special units, special forces gun down Amin's bodyguards, and he's going to have Amin killed. Following the special forces, he's going to send in 80,000 Soviet soldiers. The Soviets are very nervous sending soldiers into Afghanistan for the reasons I just mentioned. They're anxious, they're bewildered, there's trepidation. They know that this is not an easy task. A lot of the politicians, then they were afraid that sending in the Soviet military would spark Muslim resentment. And when I say Muslim resentment, I don't mean just Afghans. Many Afghans will unite to fight the Soviets. That's nationalism. When I say Muslim resentment, I'm talking about neighboring countries with Muslims traveling from these countries into Afghanistan to help fight against the Soviet empire. Now, there's this fear in the Soviet Union as well that their reputation is on the line. They have to act. Like all empires, if they don't act, they look weak. And looking weak is a dangerous game to play during the Cold War when you're having a political kind of battle with another superpower. And empires, we need to make sure we understand, from the British to Americans to the Soviets to the Germans to the French, empires are insecure. They never feel like they're safe. They have to keep expanding. They have to keep putting out fires on the borders. And this is going to be no different to what the Soviet Union does in Afghanistan in 1979. And when they send their soldiers in there, many of the soldiers are confident this is going to be easy. The soldiers are told they'll be back by next Christmas. It'll only take a year. Always know that when a leader tells its people it's going to be short, it's going to be easy. Never the case. But again, they were trying to modernize the country. They're trying to lift the government, the communist government, to align with Soviet policies. And we're going to see there's going to be a war that breaks out against them. And again, it's going to be because nationalism and religion unite to fight them off, but it'll be because of something that happens later on. Now, 1979, as I mentioned, the Soviets soldiers are filled with hubris, this confidence, overconfidence. It's going to be easy in Afghanistan. They literally have flintlock rifles that they're going to be using to fight the Soviets, helicopters and tanks and artillery and machine guns. But again, the Soviets are a state that has announced officially that they're atheists, that they don't believe in God, and this will be something, again, that allows the religious fanatics to rally around very easy in 1979. Now, history plays a role when the Soviets invade, and we must understand how history plays a role, and geography plays a role in what happens to the Soviet army in Afghanistan. Now, looking back in the 1960s and 70s, this wall on the right, this is a memorial for Vietnam. You see over here where over 58,000 Americans die in this war, this conflict, I should say. And the reason being so many Americans die, outside of the fact of this containment, trying to stop the spread of communism in the South Vietnam, was because the Soviet Union, when we were over there, chose to help fund, help train, help supply our enemy in Vietnam. The North Vietnamese are the Viet Cong. They're going to give them weapons and supplies and training. And this is called a proxy war, invoking the other superpower to fight in that country. And we will see that Americans will again find North Vietnam impossible to corral, to stop the communist spread into South Vietnam. And Americans are very angry, the CIA is very angry at what the Soviet Union did to help the North Vietnamese defeat us. So, when the Soviets invade Afghanistan, what goes around comes around. That revenge is sweet. Pakistan, actually a neighboring country of Afghanistan, will approach the CIA and ask them if they want to help support the Afghans. And the CIA, seeing a moment to have revenge on the Soviet Union, will gladly help supply weapons to the Mujahideen. These are the soldiers fighting the organization, the group called himself the Mujahideen, the Afghans, and anybody else who entered from the outside countries. So we will give weapons to Pakistan. There you go. And they will smuggle these weapons across the border into Afghanistan to help supply them. And again, it goes back to that Cold War. Any enemy of the Soviet Union deserved American support. And again, we wanted to give the Soviets their own taste of their own medicine. We wanted to right the wrong of Vietnam. It was our first ever humiliation as a country, and we thought this would be a perfect opportunity to vindicate those transgressions from the Soviets to the Vietnam conflict. So we're going to do the same. We're going to, again, goes around, comes around, and return the favor. Now, as I mentioned, a proxy war, you're looking at Afghanistan becomes a proxy war where America will help supply and train and fund the effort of the Afghans. And as I mentioned, the Afghans go from using flintlock rifles and getting slaughtered by the Soviet helicopters and the tanks, crushed by the tanks and artillery and the machine guns, to being supplied by the CIA, being supplied by some other financial backers actually from America. And they're going to start shooting down and killing many Soviets. They use a lot of mines on the roadside IEDs that will blow up and kill Soviets as they're traveling on their columns on the main roads. And they'll start sending Stinger missiles up into the sky to shoot down the helicopters, or again, where they used to be defenseless. And this is the CIA teaching these Mujahideen fighters how to kill and how to be better at killing with using modern weaponry. Terrorist attacks, guerrilla warfare, I should call it, attacks. These Stinger missiles will actually pay $250,000 a piece to get these things back after the war, in fear of them being used to shoot down American planes. But you see a picture here of some Afghan fighters having a little lunch around a shot down Russian or Soviet helicopter. One of the captured Russians will tell his Afghan captors that Afghanistan has become a thorn in our throats. It's Soviet Union. What the Vietnam was to America, Afghanistan becomes to the Soviet Union. It's going to weaken their government at home. The armed forces coming into Afghanistan are not prepared to fight this kind of style. Many Soviets will die, and they will want to get out of this war in Afghanistan. One of the Mujahideen fighters we actually fund and train and supply to kill Soviets was no other than this guy, Osama bin Laden, who will be the mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks. Now, as the Soviet Union spends billions of dollars to put down this insurgency, this war in Afghanistan, and they do it without any kind of end result, with 25,000 Soviets killed, with all this money, with nobody paying any respect to the dead soldiers coming back. Their prestige across the world will decline. They will be bankrupt. They will struggle economically, and their influence across the world will wane, will slow down. But when we kick out, when we help the Afghans remove the Soviets from power in Afghanistan, it's going to create a power vacuum. Now, power vacuum is this empty space of power that needs filled. And we need to make sure we look at history. And we look at when you topple a government, when you get rid of a government, we get rid of somebody who's in power, somebody's going to be sucked into that power vacuum. Somebody's going to fill that power vacuum. And we need to make sure we understand that oftentimes the person or the people who fill that power vacuum are usually the most ruthless of all the people competing for that power. And we're going to see when the Soviets get removed from power, the Mujahideen starts breaking down into different factions, different groups, and these groups are going to start fighting each other. And it actually breaks out into civil war following the exit of the Soviet Union. And these groups are going to fight for power. Kabul, which is actually the main city of Afghanistan, capital of Afghanistan, it is going to be destroyed during the Civil War. And thousands upon thousands of Afghans die in this Civil War. One group out of that group is going to finally take power. Afghanistan after the Soviets left was a very dangerous place to travel. It was just a lot of gangs, a lot of gang warfare, a lot of different tribesmen controlling different regions of Afghanistan. Well, this is Muhammad Omar, and he's a leader of the Taliban. And the Taliban will take power after they control about 90% of Afghanistan. And when they take power, they're going to set up a very strict Muslim laws. They're going to set up a theocracy. They're going to set up a non-secular society where religion and laws are going to be hand in hand. And Omar will be the guy who, after the 9/11 attacks, where Osama bin Laden is in Afghanistan, when the United States tells Omar, hand over Osama bin Laden, he's going to be, as a leader of the Taliban, tell America to go pound salt, that he's not handing over Osama bin Laden. We, as a result, will knock the Taliban from power following 2001, the attack on 9/11. And we see the Taliban actually coming back today, sadly enough. Now, our next date, 8/8/1990, we're looking at Iraq. We're looking at Saddam Hussein. He's going to attack, lead an assault on Kuwait and the oil in Kuwait, the city of Kuwait. America is going to respond with the Gulf War, Persian Gulf War, in 1990. Now, before we attack, we're going to use Saudi Arabia as a base to launch the invasion into Kuwait to push Saddam's forces out. This is a very easy victory for America. We're going to destroy Saddam's army. We're not going to knock Saddam from power, though. We're not going to do that until after 2001. But what we're going to do is we're going to push the Iraqis out of Kuwait as they try to take that and occupy it. We're going to, at the same time, as I mentioned, we're going to use Saudi Arabia bases as a launching pad into here to kill Iraqi soldiers. Now, this is going to trigger a response because when you look at Westerners in 1990 coming over Americans using Saudi Arabia, which is, remember, of the 19 terrorists, 15 of them came from Saudi Arabia. When we land here, we bring our soldiers here, we're going to use this base to attack fellow Muslims, fellow Arabs. And we'd make sure before all these countries, Sykes-Picot Accord, people identified themselves in groups. They identified themselves with religious affiliations, whether it's the Shiites or the Sunnis or the Sikhs. They identify themselves as the Kurds as groups. So when we use Westerners come over here, Americans, use this base to attack and kill other Arabs and Muslims, some people are going to take offense to it. Okay, and we're going to launch that invasion from Saudi Arabia, part of it, from Saudi Arabia to crush the Iraqi forces here. And we're going to push, like I said, Saddam out. One of the Saudis who becomes very upset that his government allowed American forces to use his country as a means to launch an invasion on fellow Muslims is Osama bin Laden. Here he is again. He comes from a very rich family. He has tons of siblings. But his dad owned a construction company, and he's going to be very wealthy. Saudi Arabia will actually expel him. They will kick him out. He will flee. He'll head over into Africa first, but eventually he settles in Afghanistan. And again, we're looking at 1990. He went to Sudan first, I believe. Then he went over to Afghanistan, where again he masterminded 9/11 attacks in 2001. So again, we see this cause and effect. We use Saudi Arabia as a base. Fanatical Islamic Muslims or fanatics. I hate to even say Osama bin Laden's Muslim, but fanatics are going to use it as a justification to carry out 9/11 attacks. Now, let's jump to 12/25/1991. Again, what happened in 12/25/1991? Well, this is the official end of the Soviet Union. It's going to officially collapse. The Soviet flag will come down from the last time in Moscow, and it has not risen since. Now, we did see cracks from 1989 on. When the Soviets lose in Afghanistan, we see cracks in this empire. And starting in 1989, like I mentioned, Afghanistan, we also in 1989 had the Berlin Wall come down. This is going to be broken down where you see East and West Berlin united, and you're going to see East and West Germany united. And when the Soviet Union collapses, we have Americans celebrating. It's an exciting time in American history, even though it was kind of a dull ending to such a climactic event in history. 44-year period ends without a shot being fired, which is crazy. And it was on Christmas Day, which I think is something that's kind of ironic. But so we see the Soviet Union starts in roughly 1922, I think was the first year. And it starts, and it's going to build. It's going to be strong by the mid 70s, but we start seeing cracks by the late 70s, and then we see cracks starts to shatter in 1989. In the 1991, it officially shatters. And these countries, when I say falls apart, these countries are going to break away from what was the Soviet Union, and Russia is now Russia, and you have part Ukraine back to Russia, but you see these countries now independent. These countries are in Eastern Europe. And again, we'll talk about it. But as a result, 12/25, 1991, America becomes the only superpower. Now we become the target for the world. And again, looking at connections to 9/11. America as the only superpower, and giving these guys, these radicals, a reason to carry out terrorist attacks on American soil, like 9/11. And we see that horrific day in American history and even world history, because it's going to have an effects on the world as well as America being a superpower. This was the end of our journey. I know I kind of sped through the end, but again, we're trying to make this connection. So we have to remind ourselves back to the beginning, full circle. What's more important, the push or the fall? We always study the fall in history. Oftentimes we study the fall, study what happened in 9/11. Sometimes we forget the push. All these dates are the push. They're the why there was a fall. And if we know the push, we know the motive. If we know the motive, we can maybe prevent such an attack happening again, whether it's on our soil or somebody else's soil. Now, here are the dates again. If you want to look, we have World War I breaks out, which leads to the creation of the Middle East. We have Hitler takes power as a result of the economic uncertainties created in Germany following World War I. And then he's going to commit the Holocaust, which will then lead to the world feeling sympathetic and push for a country, the Jews having their own country, which is Israel. But it takes land away from the Palestinians. We see 1953, the Iranian coup, which this is going to reinforce to the Middle Eastern governments. It doesn't matter if they're democracies. If it doesn't align with American interests, their selfishness, then they are going to get involved in their government. 1979, the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan. We're going to help train to kill the Soviets. The Afghans would kill the Soviets and anybody else, extremists who come in from other countries. And we're going to help train them. And the Soviet Union is eventually going to collapse as a result and lose prestige throughout the world because of that failed invasion of Afghanistan. We see the Gulf War, where the United States is going to launch an invasion from the Saudi bases to kill and push back Saddam's forces in the Gulf, and that's going to upset some Saudis who view that as a disrespect, allowing Western infidels, as they call them, Christians, to launch an invasion on fellow Muslims. And we see 1991, the Soviet Union collapses, which makes America the only superpower. So, again, just trying to reinforce the fact history matters. We remind ourselves, though, terrorists really have no power. They can carry out attacks. Most of them, actually, none of them have been as big as 9/11 as of yet. We do have to worry about nuclear weapons being in the hands of the wrong people. But as of now, terrorists have very little power. They are that fly in the China shop, and we are the bull. And we have to make sure when there is a terrorist attack, we don't overreact with heuristics, with emotion. We need to calm down and think things through. But we look at those dates, going to create the Middle East the way it is. We have studied these countries, just at least been introduced to them, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. We need to make sure we understand, because of the past, because of what happened in 2001, we're going to overthrow Ammar, we're going to overthrow Saddam, and this is going to, we're actually going to execute Saddam. We're going to hang him after a trial, and this is going to open up Pandora's box. And once we open up Pandora's box, you got to be careful. When you start pulling these governments out, these strong autocratic leaders out, who are going to keep people in line, when you start toppling these people from Iraq, from Afghanistan, it's going to open up Pandora's box. It's going to create a power vacuum. And again, remind you, if you look at history, whether it's Robespierre or Lenin or Stalin or Hitler or Mao or Mussolini or Castro, sometimes when you create this power vacuum, when the authority is overthrown, sometimes the worst people take those spots. And we need to make sure we're conscious of that. And if we look at ISIS, for example, they're a byproduct of getting rid of Saddam. When the majority of people in Iraq are Shiite Muslim, and they were actually oppressed by the Sunnis for decades, who Saddam was a Sunni Muslim. When he's overthrown, the Shiites are going to take power. ISIS is a Sunni-led organization. Now, when I say Sunni, they're not true. I don't consider them true Muslim if they're beheading people and killing innocent people. But this so-called terrorist group, this ISIS organization, who wants to create a caliphate of the Middle East under one rule, is a byproduct of having the Middle Eastern leaders like Saddam overthrown. And I put over here, this is an opium plant. This is the main ingredient for heroin. One thing we need to make sure we understand is not everything's evil about an organization. Omar, who set up a very strict religion in Afghanistan, religious law, theocracy, he's going to crush opium production by 90+%. When we overthrow him in Afghanistan, we get rid of him, opium production's back up. It's one of their main crops in Afghanistan, opium fields. So again, we just to throw that in there, this is something, heroin is a very horrific thing right now. We do not get our heroin, our opium from Afghanistan. That's more in the Eastern cultures. We tend to get ours from Central and South America. But just make sure we understand. Now, conditions right now in Syria. We have a civil war in Syria. The Soviet Union is Russia is actually going to support Assad here, who's a leader of Syria. He uses chemical weapons on his people. Right now, he's battling for his own power. He's fighting against not just ISIS, but he's also fighting against rebel groups that are trying to overthrow him. And Russia's trying to keep him in power. The United States wants him out of power. But again, we have to be careful. When we got rid of Saddam, ISIS came to be. If we get rid of Assad, who's going to take his place? Again, we have to remind ourselves those power vacuums oftentimes are filled by the nastiest lots of people. This just looks at a refugee camp, clouds over Cedar. I would like for us to do maybe a 3D. It's actually a virtual reality of this. Get this off Mr. Laughlin. Maybe we can watch it in class. Just kind of get us in a refugee camp. These are the Syrian refugees who have been forced to leave Syria and head to neighboring countries like Jordan and settle in these refugee camps. And it's just a very difficult position for these children. I feel very heartbroken for them. And this is a video that kind of reinforces it. Now, the war on terror, we have to ask ourselves those 60 words, given presidents unlimited power to put out whatever they define as terrorism, whatever they define as necessary. We have to ask, has this been productive? This political cartoonist right here would argue that the war on terror has not been productive. It's not been conclusive. We're pretty much going in circles, and it's never going to end, according to this political cartoonist, because we're fighting ideology. We're fighting against people we don't fully understand, and because we don't fully understand, we have miscommunication, and there's lack of trust, and again, it's based off of history. And this concludes the war on terror. I hope you enjoyed and you feel more enlightened. Again, this is scaffolding. We're going to be talking about this stuff as we go into the school year, as we go backwards here. Our next unit will be the Cold War. I'm very excited about it. And I'm looking forward to working with you folks the rest of the year. You guys rock. Peace out.